This is the culture.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Cinema Wave podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Mark Jacobino. I'm joined by Vinny Albano. How you doing, Vinny?
I'm doing good. It's a pleasure to be here today.
So we usually have our third member today for animation discussions, but Mikey couldn't join today, so me and Vinny will be at the helm. But we have done a 2-hour conversation in the past on podcasts, so no worries there. We'll be fine. So we are talking about Solo Leveling Episode 8. This is frustrating. A pretty apt title for this episode because this episode felt very expositional. It was a bridge episode, but there's a fine line you could walk when you have a bridge episode of making it still interesting, but maybe not having as much action or big moments. So how did you feel about this episode? Was it too much exposition? Was it not enough, moving the story forward? Where did you kind of land with this?
I'm just going to be brutally honest here. I actually thought it was a very solid episode. I feel like with the amount of exposition and just kind of like going from a high of action, and then going to this, I feel like I would have liked it less. But I thought it was a very pretty episode compared to, I feel like every episode is just getting prettier and prettier. I don't know if I'm just like adapting to the art style, but little things they do, playing with the light. I'm even looking at this one scene right here with the two S-rank characters they meet, and they have this beautiful sunset lighting on them. And I think that also really helped me as someone who has a very visual eye, get through this very bridge-like episode. I do think, though, even with all this exposition, the exposition was delivered very interestingly because it was all stuff that I wanted to know about.
Right.
We talked about on like the previous episodes, like the questions behind the guilds, and then we find out in this episode the 5 largest guilds. They get names, and names and faces placed to them, as well as Jin-ho's whole plan with starting his own guild. And we see them start to go out and try to employ S ranks to like join their new guild, and seeing also the lives of the people from the double dungeon and where their lives have been going for the last 4 months. I don't know. I found it very interesting, and a little bit of foreshadowing here and there. We get a drop on the islands that we saw in the first episode. So we're still not getting all the answers, but we're getting breadcrumbs, which is nice.
Yeah. I think maybe from a Mawa perspective, maybe it was a bit of a slower episode for me because this is all information I knew, and I was hoping they'd maybe deliver it more interestingly. But I do understand, as a new watcher or anyone that hasn't been exposed to the story before, this might have been really interesting to hear the guild's names, see their logos, see kind of the behind the scenes politics of the guilds. They're trying to prevent S ranks from leaving their guild. They want to be the top 5 guilds. They probably have their own kind of revenue system. The more S ranks you have, the more revenue you're going to pull in. So I do agree that some of the scenes I feel were a lot more interesting. There was a lot less of those just wide shots just on still characters. I feel like they added some particle effects in the window. I feel like in one scene there was there was like dust kind of in the air in the dojo, I think it was, with Song, the guy that lost his arm in the first couple episodes. So I do think, it was very pretty. I think Hiroyuki Sawano, I think there was 3 moments in this episode. There was some beautiful music, new pieces that we hadn't heard before. I think I mentioned in the first episode with the background that, there should be a lot of piano pieces with Sawano, and I think in 2 scenes in particular, I think the one that you talked about with the 2 S ranks talking, there was this beautiful piano playing in the background. So really loved that the music was really highlighted here. And it's just it is exciting to kind of see this world coming together because you want to get to the good stuff, but you have to establish all this stuff. Again, they haven't named the country that they're in, the top 5 guilds. So I'm still very scared that hasn't been dropped, that they're in South Korea or not. So we'll see. What are your?
I found out.
Yeah,
sorry, I hate to interrupt you.
Go.
I found out some information on that actually.
Oh, okay. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I apologize. Hold your thought.
No, keep going.
I watched a video explaining that if you're watching the show in Japan, they actually all have Japanese names. All the names are changed to Japanese, and it takes place in Tokyo. But to all third-party like distributors, like how we're watching it on Crunchyroll, in other countries, the names are still Korean. So that gets really interesting with like how you mentioned how the geopolitical aspect of it. And I've seen conversation online say the same thing of like, later on in the series, it gets very geopolitical and there is conflict on Jin Woo being Korean himself. So I'm really interested where they go with this as well.
So it is confirmed essentially like they wouldn't animate extra scenes, right? Just for Japan to be like, we're in Japan here, and then for everyone else they animated it to be ambiguous where they were. Like, do you think that's it, or do you think like it's inevitable that we'll get the Japan drop at some point because they've essentially confirmed that that's what they're doing?
I think that for people in other countries like us, it's going to be kept ambiguous, but I'm very curious what they're going to do, if they're going to like cut scenes out of the Japanese version and then like give us extra scenes, or like eventually, I don't know. We're still not like that far into the story to like really tell.
Yeah.
But I did watch a video confirming that if you are watching this in Japan, it's different names. They're not Korean at all.
Shit. Okay.
Yeah. But they do, obviously, like I mentioned, I'm watching this and they're saying the Korean names. So.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, guess we'll see. I do like what you said about the other people outside the double dungeon who survived, and now we see glimpses of their lives and how they're doing today after this like traumatic experience. And I feel like this part of the Mawa I kind of forget. Like as I was watching this episode, I was trying to remember if they did get this much of a spotlight in the Mawa. I wasn't sure if they did. So if these are added, I think it's a great addition.
Yeah.
If not, I just forgot about it. Maybe there were small scenes, but yeah, I really like especially the one scene with the guy who was very selfish in the double dungeon, and he was all about it for himself, trying to survive. And you see now why, because he has a small kid at home. Such a small kid that they might have been, much small, like a baby at the point when he was in the double dungeon. So you can really understand why he would put himself first. And I think it brings in that dynamic of selfless versus selfishness. It's like, was that selfish of him to kind of put himself above Jin Woo in the first episode if he did have a family at home? I don't think so, especially with this scene. And I do like the B rank healer coming back, and she's still pushing through this, but she does, accept the mission, and she does show up. And I do like that we have this coming together moment, full circle moment of the double dungeon crew getting back together. And I just love Song. He's such a good mentor, such a good guy. He's like, I'm so glad a young boy like you is doing well and you healed up. Like, I love it. I love it. And so I'm a big fan of him. And then we get the inmates. What are your predictions for the inmates? Because they give them a lot of screen time here that they'll be joining to fill out the minimum requirement to go in the dungeon.
Yeah, it's a really compelling aspect. It kind of reminds me of in storytelling and writing, like just lessons of like learning how to create good storytelling. I know Stephen King talks about like if you don't know where to bring your characters, like let's say your characters are all in like a very like peaceful setting and you don't know what to do with them, bring a bomb into the situation. Like for example, there's a book that he wrote, avoiding spoilers for anyone who's a Stephen King fan or wants to read this book, but anyhow, all these characters end up in one location and then he just kind of didn't know what to do with them, so he brings in this dangerous force that ends up killing half of them. So this kind of what it reminds me of. It's like they're going into a D rank dungeon, which isn't hard at all. Right. This should be butter, for Sung Jin Woo. But then bringing in these inmates is like bringing a bomb into the restaurant, like a bomb underneath the table it's just ticking.
Right.
So I think something is going to go really terribly bad. I think that there's 3 inmates. There's about 4 of them, right?
Yeah, I believe. Yeah, it's Song, Jinwoo, the B rank, and then 2 others. So I think 5 others, and then the 3, and then the guy from the Hunter Association who's looking after the 3 inmates. The guy in the suit who's the B rank. I think just Hunter, regular Hunter. Okay. So there's 9 in total, but he's just observing the inmates.
All right. So, that brings in because I didn't know he was joining them in the dungeon. Yeah. But that's really interesting because I don't know. I think they're definitely something's gonna go wrong. I feel like it's very obvious that they're gonna turn. They're probably gonna like, if at least in my head, I forget the B rank hunter's name, the girl.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting her name. I think it might be Jin-ho or
Yeah, these are tough names to be honest.
yeah. But anyhow, I'm thinking like they made it a point that like they pointed her out as like, you know, easy prey. So maybe they hold her hostage in return of their freedom or something like that. And I think it's going to put Jin Woo, and this is only speculating. This is only theorizing. Jin Woo is going to have to make a tough decision. What if Jin Woo has to kill more humans again? But now, this time, there's other people around except for just Jin-ho.
Right.
So then that could really change his reputation. I don't know, but they're definitely not up to good here. Definitely not going to be up to good.
And we know that they've alluded to that, you know, there's no rules in dungeons. There's no like police force for dungeons. Like whatever happens in dungeons usually gets swept under the rug.
Yeah.
So I think that's like a good prediction. I've read the manhwa, everyone, so I can't speculate with him, but I like where he's going. Let's talk about the S rank hunters. We see a bit more of the Tiger Guild guy, the guy with the glasses, and they're talking about Juji Island. I forget what it's called, the island with the ants that we saw in the beginning, and how essentially that raid failed, and they, you know, it's like a looming threat. What are your thoughts on this island that is out there that even S rank hunters couldn't, you know, subdue whatever's going on there?
Yeah, we're getting a lot more breadcrumbs, you know. Like how I mentioned, they're not giving us all the answers, but they're bringing us back, which I really appreciate, because over these handful of weeks that we've been reviewing this, you know, I've been bringing up like, oh, when are we returning to that island, or what's this or what's that, right? We see that he mentions to the other one with the
like the tiger one.
He says that you left something on that island, and then it cuts to him at the bar and he says a name. We also get like a small flashback of a person kind of like looking like they're getting killed or taken by one of the ants, and then cut to a very like abrupt, weirdly placed scene of this like wet, almost like cellar looking area where we just see like the legs of a couple people. It seems like someone's getting held hostage here. And then we see this close up of this older man that says they have to die. And that's all we get.
Yeah.
So with the editing, at least how that scene is sequenced in the episode, I'm made to assume that whoever they left on that island is now being held hostage by like this person or like this organization. So now this is bringing in questions of like, is that island more than just ants and monsters and like a dungeon break? What if there's other people taking advantage of that, like taking advantage of the dungeon break on this island, and I don't know, like having some sort of human trafficking ring or dealing, just doing crime on that island as as like a cover up. I don't know, but I think that humans are involved in that situation more than just a bunch of monsters on the loose.
Yeah, it was definitely a scene I was like, oh, that's interesting how they just kind of put that in there after that moment there, and it makes you question, maybe as a viewer that hasn't, you know, been exposed to the work, like who would, you know, dare stand up to an S rank or even threaten an S rank with like whatever the plan is. Like, it's very interesting. I think the story, you know, in the manhwa and here has done a really good job of setting the power ceiling and kind of where we want to go. You know, we see early on the ant island, we set that, and then Jin Woo goes into this hellish landscape and he's like, he needs to get the elixir of life, and we see this burning tower. He's like, I need to conquer that. And I feel like it just keeps doing a good job of saying, oh, you think he's strong now, look where we can go after that, look where all of this stuff is going. And then weaving in these little, you know, just real world intricacies with, you know, someone bribing someone related to an S rank hunter, the power struggle between the guilds, the geopolitical aspect that we don't know where that's going. I think they've done just a really good job. I'm trying to think of really what else like really big happened here. We know Jin-ho is starting the guild, and Jin Woo has now come back, and after he just blew him off last week, he's come back and said, no, I'll join your guild, but I want to just do it me and you. We know that that's not possible. They have to have a minimum amount of hunters going into the dungeon. So he's like, oh well, we'll just hire people like the inmates or the thieves in the last one did to us. So it just brings up a lot of questions, like how is he going to hide his identity if they're continually doing this? Because he's only going to get stronger, and he's only going to be able to clear these dungeons faster, and these people are going to see it, and the word's going to get out about Jin Woo. Where do you think that storyline's going with Jin-ho, Jin Woo continually, upgrading and needing to use Jin-ho, while Jin-ho also needs to use him for this dynamic that they have?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough to see where it's going as of right now, but I do like what we're being fed so far of like the creation of this new guild. Rumors are spreading. All the S rank hunters, they're aware that Jin-ho is making this guild. They even try to enlist the blonde S rank hunter. She refuses, however. So I don't, these S ranks are refusing, but maybe Sung Jin Woo and Jin-ho will do something to kind of promote the guild in a good light to have these S rank hunters that they're trying to enlist be more persuaded of like, you know what, I will join you guys. So I don't know. It's really tough to gauge as of right now, but I do like where they're going with it. It also kind of like how you mentioned how Sung Jin Woo is taking that same method of just like hiring others to just fill that prerequisite of like 8 people. That brings in like the morality of Sung Jin Woo, because he's a good guy overall, but we're seeing him go into these really darker places and commit. He's not lawful good. He's going more into like into more of a chaotic neutral or a chaotic good. So it's showing. I thought it was just a very nice little character moment of seeing how he's adopting the quote unquote enemy's tactics of like, oh, you saw what they did? They hired us. We can do the same. So it blurs the line. It's not so black and white. It's very blurry gray line, which I like. I think it's making the show a little bit more complex than I thought it'd be. Because I'm not gonna lie, going into the show, I thought it was gonna be very like one note surface, like, oh, it'd just be a lot of fun action. But we're seeing a little bit more nuance here. And I think with the whole, just kind of summing up my point here, with the whole Jin-ho construction company guild coming together, it illustrates more of that like grayish area. So more nuance. I don't know. There's just a lot of they can play around here with. I think it's just making the story as a whole a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good point to say, he's using his enemy's tactics for his own benefit, but we know that, the world kind of took advantage of him at one point, and again, there might be some deep-seated feelings of him trying to get back at the world, because he was treated so low, even though he was supposed to be a hunter, someone that was revered by other people, but that never really happened. So it brings in that aspect. We see the S ranks when they do have that discussion we've been mentioning a lot. He says like, why did you make me do that TV interview? Kind of bringing in this whole aspect of fame. Like there's fame, fortune that's also contributing to the hunters and their society and how they operate. So we see, the guy with the glasses, he's a little bit more calculated. He's kind of a puppet master. The tiger's kind of the front man for the guild, and he doesn't want to be the front man. And then we see the blonde girl. She's kind of she just trains. She's just like casually just doing laps at a park, or she's, helping some people get their their purses back. Like she's very like not in the spotlight. So it's painting a picture of what all these S ranks are. And they said, I believe 12, right? In the country, they said there's 12 S ranks, something around there. So we've only seen about 3. Those ones that we saw in the beginning on the Ant Island, they might be other ones. I forget if they're A or S rank. But yeah, they're definitely like building out like a nice world here, and I'm excited for it all to start clashing. So how does Jin Woo fit into all this? How do the new guild on the block? How does it kind of shake the hive of all the other guilds and all the politics that goes on there? So I mean, I came into this episode saying it's a bit frustrating of an exposition episode, but I agree that I think it is building a lot of exciting things. So I think this conversation has actually changed my outlook on the episode. It was definitely like when this episode ended, I watched it last night, I was like, oh, was that it? I kind of wanted more. But some people say that's a good feeling. Other people say, oh, that wasn't enough in that episode. But I guess I'm falling in the better of I'm excited to see what goes next week. Yeah. And I think, we have 3 episodes left. This was 8, so 9, 10, 11, 12. Okay, 4. 3 on the number scale, but 4 in episode scale, if you know that type of math. But yeah, I think that's all my thoughts. Did you have anything else that you wanted to bring up for this episode?
Nothing really, just kind of like reinstating things. One, okay, this might be a very long reach type of comparison. Okay. But have you seen The Boys?
No. I'm sorry. No, our producer has, and Darian might be able to help out.
The Boys is incredible.
Yeah, it's on my list.
This is like, because The Boys is very violent and very satirical, but the whole like Hunters Association and how the S rank hunters kind of act reminds me a little bit of the politics in The Boys, of how you have these superheroes, but they're on like interviews and talk shows and they're like celebrities, but they also are people with these great powers that are doing like these crazy things. But their identities are very much known to the public. Yeah. I don't know. I was just getting a little bit of like The Boys type of vibes.
Yeah, I could totally see that as someone who hasn't seen The Boys. I think it is an interesting like play to bring in the fact that, superheroes becoming celebrities, like the old comic books, like the superheroes, like their persona was the celebrity that everyone loved, but not the people. But now, we have these shows and these stories where it's synonymous, the person and the persona are famous together, and you can get fame and fortune from being a superhero. That wasn't something that Superman wanted to do. Batman literally separates his persona from that. So it is an interesting thing that I think is made, at least for me, someone who didn't grow up like as a big superhero fan, it makes me more interested in the medium of like superhero storytelling. Not that Solo Leveling is, but to a degree, I mean, the hunters are superheroes. Like they do have these supernatural abilities and they protect society in a roundabout way while getting paid to do it. So I do think that's a cool comparison, and I promise I will be watching The Boys soon. I promise.
Do it. It's so good. It's so good.
Yes.
Lastly, I just wanted to say, like, this is definitely not one of the best episodes thus far. Like we mentioned, it's a lot of exposition, but I still think it's delivered very solid. I will say though, but easily my favorite part of this was just seeing the background of the double dungeon people, like Joe-hee and Mr. Song and Mr. Kim.
You found the names on the laptop?
Just seeing like how their life has been, and like just that little moment of like how she's on the phone arguing with her mom. Yeah. Like, oh, you don't run my life, and seeing, like you mentioned, Kim with his son or his child. And Mr. Song at the dojo. I just thought that was just such a nice moment. It's bringing us back to what really matters, which is character. So that was just the end of my thoughts.
For sure. And it makes us like really scared for what's going to happen in the future with them going into the dungeon, because now we care about them outside of just like a surface level. They were in the first episode. Okay, that's it. That's the only connection I have with those characters. Really exciting to see where they go with the last 4 episodes, last third of this first season. Hiroyuki Sawano, some great music here. Can't wait till they release this on streaming so I can listen to that. And yeah, I think that'll wrap it up for us here at Cinema Wave. Let me give you guys some plugs to our social media. If you don't already follow us at Cinema Wave Media on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Threads, as well as at _Culture Wave Media, where you can find us on Instagram. I'm Mark Jacobino, one of your hosts with the animation crew, signing off for me.
And I'm Vinny Albano.
Thanks for watching, everyone.